Welcome to Family Secrets Unveiled. Today, we delve into a kind of silence that isn't just the absence of sound, but a monstrous, living entity that feeds on memory and truth. It's the story of a lineage so meticulously pruned that the family tree itself became a hollow monument, hiding branches no one dared to speak of, not even in a whisper. Imagine a life built on a foundation of granite, solid, reliable, and utterly cold to the core. That was the life of Elias Thorne, a man who, at 55, represented the pinnacle of quiet American success. A partner in a prestigious Boston law firm, a sprawling estate in the suburbs, and a picture-perfect family. He was the anchor of his world, yet his world was a ship deliberately sailing without a proper map, lest it stumble upon submerged wreckage. Elias's wife, Genevieve, 49, was his serene counterpoint, an art curator whose eye for beauty extended to their curated life. Their marriage was a masterclass in domestic tranquility, the kind of bond people aspired to, envied even. They had 2 children, both grown and successful, continuing the Thorne legacy of impeccable achievement. But there was a fragility beneath the polished surface, a tension that vibrated like a plucked string, audible only to those listening very closely. The story truly began not with a bang, but with a rustle, the mundane, irritating sound of an old, overlooked document. Elias was clearing out his late father's study, a room untouched for 2 years, an act delayed by a strange, almost superstitious dread. His father, Admiral Richard Thorne, a man whose stern authority was legendary, had lived a life of rigid order. Everything had its place, including the silences. In a false-bottom drawer of a century-old roll-top desk, Elias found it. A small, faded, leather-bound diary, not his father's handwriting, and a single sepia-toned photograph tucked within. The diary, written in a delicate, almost frantic script, was dated from 1952. The photograph showed a woman who was the spitting image of Genevieve, only younger, her eyes holding a similar, yet more pronounced shadow of melancholy. This was the first fissure in Elias's granite foundation. His mother had passed away decades ago, and there was no known sister or cousin that bore this startling resemblance. The woman in the photo was an absolute stranger, yet utterly familiar. The diary's first entry spoke of a love born under a curse, and the terrifying realization that the bloodline is flawed. The entries were not philosophical ramblings. They were the desperate confessions of a woman named Alara, detailing a clandestine relationship with a RT, a relationship shrouded in fear and marked by meetings in forgotten seaside towns, far from the Thorne family's social epicenter. The irony was a cruel twist of the knife. Elias, the man who built his career on uncovering hidden truths and dissecting lies in courtrooms, was now the amateur detective in the most crucial case of his life, his own. The initial shock gave way to a cold, clinical curiosity, the lawyer's instinct to follow the trail of evidence, no matter how destructive. He began to cross-reference the dates, the locations mentioned in Alara's diary, against his father's naval records. The patterns were too precise to be coincidence. When his father was ostensibly at sea or on secret missions, Alara's entries placed them together. But the real, chilling discovery came from the final pages of the diary, which were stained and smeared as if by tears or rain. The last entry, dated September 1954, spoke of a child, a daughter who carries the truth in her eyes, and a desperate plan for her safety. They will never know she exists, the entry concluded. The silence must be absolute, or the entire edifice will crumble. Elias looked at the photograph again, then across the breakfast table at his own wife, Genevieve, her face serene as she read the morning news. The resemblance was no longer a curious coincidence. It was a terrifying echo. Could it be that the family tree had indeed sprouted a secret, hidden branch? A branch that had, through a cruel twist of fate, regrafted itself back onto the main trunk, right into the most intimate part of Elias's life? The possibility was grotesque, a violation of the most fundamental laws of kinship. The air in his elegant home suddenly felt thin, the walls closing in, and the silence, that beautiful, cultivated silence, now felt like a pressure against his eardrums. ready to burst. He had to know the full story, but he also knew that pursuing this secret might destroy not just his marriage, but the entire, carefully constructed reality of the Thorne name. The danger was palpable. Some secrets, once disturbed, don't just reveal themselves. They strike back. The discovery of Alara's diary and the unsettling photograph didn't just rattle Elias. It began to systematically dismantle the comfortable edifice of his world. The cold, lawyerly pursuit of truth became a feverish, personal obsession, forcing him into a clandestine life he'd always scorned. The first event that dramatically propelled the story forward was utterly mundane on the surface, but fraught with sinister implication for Elias. He was late leaving the office one evening, the city slick with a sudden, torrential rain. As he pulled his sleek sedan from the parking garage, a dark, unmarked vehicle, a heavy, older model, pulled out right behind him, maintaining a distance that was professional and unnerving. It wasn't just following, it was monitoring. The paranoia he initially dismissed as stress-induced fatigue now sharpened into a terrifying certainty. Someone knew he was digging. The Thorne family's power wasn't just economic. Admiral Richard Thorne, even in death, seemed to possess a shadowy network of protection, a legacy of influence that extended far beyond the Navy. Elias realized his father's silences weren't just personal discretion. They were a systemic enforcement. His relationship with Genevieve became a tightrope walk over an abyss. He watched her now, not with a husband's affection, but with a detective's scrutiny. He looked for the shadow in her eyes that mirrored Alara's, for any telltale sign that she knew, or perhaps, was the secret. Genevieve, sensing his distance and distraction, misinterpreted it as the stress of his demanding career, offering him comforting assurances and an almost unsettling level of support. This only intensified Elias's internal conflict. Was this genuine love, or a masterfully sustained performance? The next crucial piece of evidence came from a source he had initially overlooked. The family housekeeper, Mrs. Petrov, a woman of 72 who had served the Thorne household for over 40 years, a quiet fixture whose eyes missed nothing. Under the guise of discussing estate matters, Elias gently led the conversation to his father's past, specifically the mid-1950s. Mrs. Petrov, normally stoic, became visibly agitated. With a trembling voice and an urgent whisper, she spoke of the other house, not the main residence, but a small, secluded property in upstate New York that Admiral Thorne had maintained under a false corporate name. A place where a small, quiet woman and a baby girl had briefly lived. Mrs. Petrov confirmed the woman's name was Alara, and she confirmed Alara's dramatic, sudden disappearance, claiming the Admiral had been heartbroken, but also terrifyingly relieved. But then came the true shockwave. Mrs. Petrov, tears welling, confessed one night she'd heard a heated argument between the Admiral and a younger man. A man she faintly recognized as Genevieve's father, Walter Sterling, a seemingly respectable historian from a minor New England family. The argument was about a bargain struck, and a price that was too high. The core of the conflict was clear. Walter Sterling had apparently been the one to take Alara's child, the secret daughter, and raise her as his own, integrating her seamlessly into his life, thereby erasing her Thorne heritage. The realization hit Elias with the force of a physical blow. Genevieve was not just a woman who resembled his father's secret lover. She was most likely his half-sister. The intricate web of his life, his marriage, his children, his entire social fabric, was woven from a single foundational lie. He had married his own kin, unknowingly committing a transgression that was both biblically abhorrent and fundamentally destructive to the concept of family he held so dear. The emotional burden became unbearable. The love he felt for Genevieve was deep and true, but it was now tainted, twisted into a horrifying genetic paradox. He started looking for documents relating to Genevieve's adoption or birth, only to find the records were impeccably clean, sealed by a power that only an admiral with secret military connections and deep political influence could possess. He was in a labyrinth, and every wall was painted with a chilling picture of deceit. The atmosphere in the Thorne home became suffocating. The dark car continued its silent vigil outside. Elias, trapped, felt the despair of a man who had pulled a single thread and watched his entire world unravel. He was a prisoner in his own life, bound by a secret so profound it defied imagination. He couldn't confront Genevieve. The truth would shatter her, and likely lead to a consequence far worse than a broken marriage, perhaps exposing the entire family to the vengeance of whatever dark force his father had leveraged to maintain the silence. He was teetering on the edge of a terrible confession, desperately needing a final piece of evidence to confirm the unthinkable, a piece that would either condemn or, miraculously, exonerate them both. His only solace was the conviction that the secret daughter's fate, Alara's child, had to be the key, and he knew exactly where to look next. The hidden property in upstate New York, the other house. The journey to the secluded upstate New York property was less a drive and more a desperate flight into the heart of the darkness. Elias went alone, telling Genevieve he was handling a high-stakes, last-minute case. The dark sedan was absent from his rearview mirror, a momentary lapse in the surveillance that felt more like a calculated trap than freedom. The house was an overgrown cottage, shuttered and forgotten, reeking of damp wood and ancient secrets. Inside, the dust lay thick and undisturbed, a testament to decades of enforced oblivion. He found nothing overtly incriminating in the main rooms, just the ghostly residue of domesticity. A faded patch on the wall where a child's height had been marked, a few antique toys. But in the attic, tucked beneath a loose floorboard, lay the final, undeniable proof. It wasn't a diary, but a small, metal lockbox, opened with the skeleton key Elias recognized as his father's. Inside were 3 items. A legitimate birth certificate for a baby girl, identical to Genevieve's but listing the parents as Alara Reed and Richard Thorne. A signed, notarized confession from Walter Sterling detailing the terms of the adoption and the massive financial payoff from Admiral Thorne, and most terrifyingly, a letter. The letter was from Alara, written just hours before her disappearance. It wasn't addressed to Richard Thorne, but to her daughter, a message to be read when the truth finds its way. The handwriting was the same delicate, frantic script from the diary. She wrote of their love being real, but fatally entangled with a powerful clandestine society. Not just a club or a network, but a dangerous, shadowy organization that the Admiral was deeply entrenched in, a group that valued purity of bloodlines and absolute secrecy above all else. Alara was not pure enough, and their child, a living symbol of the transgression, could expose them all. The most damning revelation: Alara did not simply disappear. She wrote that she was being forcibly relocated to a sanitarium, where she would be kept silent, and that the organization was prepared to go to any length to maintain the secrecy. The Admiral had been given a choice: end the relationship and give up the child, or face utter annihilation, the destruction of his entire family and career. He had chosen the former, striking a diabolical bargain with Walter Sterling to safeguard the child's life at the expense of her true identity. As Elias finished the letter, a heavy, metallic clang echoed from the floor below. The silence of the abandoned cottage shattered. He was not alone. The confrontation was swift and brutal. Standing at the foot of the attic stairs was Caleb Thorne, Elias's younger brother, 51, a man who had always been the quiet, unassuming partner in the law firm, often overshadowed by Elias's brilliance. Caleb, with a look of cold, calculating desperation, was holding an antique, heavy-caliber pistol, his face a mask of bitter resentment and fear. "You should have left it alone, Elias." Caleb's voice was strained, devoid of its usual placid tone. "Father's silence was a gift. He protected us all." The truth twisted again, an agonizing, unforeseen twist. Caleb wasn't just following his father's orders. He was actively involved. He confessed, his words tumbling out in a torrent of long-suppressed rage, that he had been the true silent keeper of the Thorne legacy, the one who helped the Admiral manage the dark business and maintain the barrier between Genevieve and the truth. The dark car, the surveillance, it had been Caleb all along. He had known about Genevieve and Alara's daughter all along. The true source of Caleb's anger wasn't just the secret. It was the power structure. He was the one who was meant to inherit the leadership of the shadowy organization after Elias, the elder son, was deemed too soft and too focused on domestic bliss. But the family secret, Genevieve's existence as a thorn by blood, was the ultimate threat. If the truth came out, it wouldn't just be Elias's marriage that crumbled. It would be the organization's entire foundation built on purity, and the Thorne's position within it. The conflict reached its terrifying peak. Caleb raised the pistol, his hand shaking, not from fear, but from the unbearable weight of his dark duty. He believed he was acting for the greater good of the Thorne name, to preserve the power Elias was recklessly threatening to destroy. "You leave me no choice, brother," he whispered, his eyes filled with a terrifying mix of love and murderous intent. Elias, standing his ground, the lockbox clutched in his hand, realized the ultimate horror. The family tree didn't just have unacknowledged branches. It had a root system built on murder and betrayal, with his own brother ready to prune him from the life he knew. The life of the lie was demanding its final, brutal sacrifice. The climax of the confrontation with Caleb was less a fiery battle and more a psychological chess game played on the razor's edge of absolute destruction. Elias didn't fight back with violence. He fought back with the very thing his brother and father had tried to bury: the truth. "If you kill me, Caleb," Elias said, his voice slow and steady, "you don't just destroy me, you destroy the silence. I've made copies. I've sent the documents, including Alara's story and the details of Father's organization, to an escrow account. They're programmed to be released to the press, to the authorities, to everyone with a single delayed digital trigger. My death is the trigger." Caleb froze, his finger hovering over the trigger guard. The realization that Elias, the soft older brother, had played the ultimate legal gambit, a dead man's switch, paralyzed him. He had been so focused on maintaining his father's primitive, violent secrecy that he hadn't accounted for his brother's modern, intellectual weapon. The entire legacy, the entire shadow network would be exposed. Caleb lowered the pistol, the defeat in his posture more complete than any physical surrender. He hadn't just lost the battle. He had lost the reason for the fight. In the aftermath, the fallout was catastrophic, yet contained. Caleb, shattered by his own moral compromise and Elias's revelation, was forced to confront the abyss of his father's legacy. Elias, in a final act of familial duty, didn't turn his brother in, but instead initiated a corporate restructuring of the law firm, effectively dissolving Caleb's power and removing him from the public eye and the organization's reach. Caleb vanished into a private, self-imposed exile, the price of his silence and betrayal being his entire public life. The most delicate and most painful resolution was with Genevieve. Elias returned home, not as a husband, but as a deliverer of the most terrifying truth. He laid out the evidence gently: Alara's diary, the birth certificate, the confession. Genevieve listened, not with disbelief, but with a strange, dawning acceptance. The melancholy shadow in her eyes, which Elias had long attributed to artistic introspection, was finally explained. It was the subconscious ache of a stolen identity, a soul's longing for a mother she never knew. The revelation that she was his half-sister was a wound that severed the core of their marital bond, yet, paradoxically, strengthened their human connection. Their love, born from deceit, could not continue as a marriage, but it could not vanish entirely. The intensity of their shared grief and the profound, genetic connection forged a new, complicated relationship, a bond of kinship and deep, mournful affection, replacing the passion of a couple with the unbreakable, tragic loyalty of family. They made the difficult, agonizing choice to quietly dissolve their marriage, protecting their adult children from the full, abhorrent truth of the incestuous nature of their union by framing it as an irreconcilable difference that had evolved over time. Their children, successful and independent, accepted the separation with confusion and sadness, forever unaware of the subterranean, dark rivers that ran beneath their normal lives. Elias Thorne, the lawyer who had spent his life seeking justice, finally found a semblance of peace, but it was a cold, hard peace earned through personal ruin. He had successfully cut the cancerous branch of the secret organization out of the Thorne family's life, but in doing so, he had pruned his own life down to the root. He was left with the knowledge that his father, the Admiral, had been a monster, and his marriage, the centerpiece of his life, a beautiful, horrible lie. He chose to dedicate his final years to a quiet, solitary life, channeling his immense intellect into pro bono work, seeking redemption by fighting the kind of systemic, hidden injustices his own family had perpetuated. The story ends not with a grand victory, but with a lingering sense of loss and the profound, dark irony of the human condition. The family tree had indeed sprouted branches no one spoke of, and in cutting them away, Elias revealed that the entire trunk was rotten. The silence was finally broken, but the truth it revealed was a deafening tragedy. The Thorne name continued, but it carried the weight of a monumental, unconfessed sin, a lasting echo of Alara's desperate cry for truth. The ultimate message is chilling. The secrets we bury in our past don't just stay dead. They grow, taking root in the very foundations of our most cherished relationships, and one day, they demand a payment far greater than we could ever imagine. This is the kind of legacy that truly haunts. If you've been on this terrifying journey with us, and if the echo of the unsaid in your own life feels a little louder now, don't keep this story a secret. Like this video? Subscribe to Family Secrets Unveiled for more dives into the darkness of the domestic world. And make sure to turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next chilling revelation. Until then, keep your eyes open and listen carefully to the silence.